Amy, welcome to the Pecha Kucha Podcast, and also welcome. This is the first time?
Yep.
So welcome to Belfast
Thank
then
you.
for the very first time as well. Could you first of all just introduce who you are away from, we're obviously going to get into the social side of things that you're involved with,
Yeah.
but could you just tell me who Amy is and sort of life before HASSL maybe?
Absolutely. So, I think growing up, I've always been like really interested in social issues and kind of like my parents raised me to, I guess, like recognize my privilege. Like I always say that, you know, I had a privileged life in the sense like my parents are amazing and like my family is amazing and like I've always had everything that I needed. But I think like from quite early on, I was kind of quite aware of that privilege and also found it quite almost like hard to deal with because there was so many horrible things going on in the world and like seemingly to me, I agree to that now, like there's nothing I did to deserve the life that I had. So I think like, it sounds really weird because it sounds like a weird thing for a child to think, but I think I had that awareness quite early on. So I always kind of knew that I wanted to do something social impact or to do with social issues or something, just to be like, I don't want to waste the privilege that I have and other people don't have that privilege and that kind of thing. So yeah, I think like growing up, I just kind of always knew that I wanted to do things like that. And then, I also was kind of very, like always doing projects and always having stuff, you know, on the go and like I couldn't sit still. And that kind of eventually led me into entrepreneurship. I think it was almost like the perfect thing for my brain and like how I think. And so I ended up doing a degree in entrepreneurship for university. And then after that, I was in the process of starting my own social enterprise and COVID hit. So the year I was graduating from university was when COVID kind of shut everything down. So the social enterprise that I was starting was like very face-to-face essentially. So then I was like, what am I going to do? And basically shielded for 6 months because my dad has long-term illnesses and very spontaneously moved to London and just kind of fell in love with it there and worked in different startups basically until I kind of decided on HASSL. So that's kind of the journey so far.
So you've mentioned HASSL there.
Yes.
And can you first tell us what HASSL is, but then what life experience or what happened for you to want to create that? Was it, was it through an impact with yourself or is it just something that you said that you found a connection?
A bit of both, to be honest. I think, so HASSL is essentially a social enterprise that is all around tackling harassment at the root. So it's trying to prevent rather than kind of create solutions afterwards for women, which often you'll see in the form of kind of safety apps or self-defense classes and things like that. And we're all about redirecting that responsibility away from women as individuals and onto society as a whole. That's kind of how I believe every social issue should be solved. I don't think it should be an individual's responsibility. I think it should be a societal, you need a societal solution to solve the problem properly. So that's kind of, that's what HASSL is. It's essentially a combination. So I only founded it in October, and we are basically working through a 5-stage plan, which is a combination of different tech, tools, and training that focus on different root causes of harassment. So we look at things like poor public space design, lack of awareness. There's still, not just amongst men, amongst all genders, still a lack of awareness of how often it happens and how much it affects people. We also look at barriers to reporting. So basically all the things that prevent people from reporting or prevent reporting going to conviction, leading to convictions. And the fourth one is systemic sexism and misogyny. And all of those, to an extent, basically are kind of male violence is rooted within that. So we look at those root causes rather than going, how do women keep themselves safe? Because we know that doesn't really work, it's never really worked. So that's kind of what HASSL is in a nutshell. So we're working through a 5-stage plan, which is a combination of all these different initiatives, because to me it's a very multifaceted, complex problem. There's not one solution. We need to kind of come at it from all angles. So it's, as I say, kind of right now we're in the stage of building like free online resources, which are for like parents, teachers, self-learning, and kind of the different things that people don't really, there's not many resources out there about. So it might be more like how to open up conversations about harassment with people in your family, rather than just the kind of legal, technical stuff. It's more like tools and things like that. And then, we're moving through a 5-stage plan, essentially. So there's other things like school programs, reporting tech. We're working on lots of partnerships with large organizations to develop initiatives relevant to their industry and things like that. So, lots of different things.
Yeah, it's very interesting because, as I said, obviously, before we started the podcast, I'm big on environment and the impact of environment.
Yeah.
Some of the things there, I think of how environment shapes
absolutely.
behaviour, because, I'm not ashamed to say that I was 16 years of age, left school, went on a building site. Mm-hmm. And at that age, like I was outgoing, but when people in an environment with people older than me, I was a bit introverted. I wouldn't have spoken up. I think that's your upbringing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sometimes your elders, you don't speak up against, you respect your elders. Mm-hmm. And I can remember watching, you can imagine a building site.
Yeah.
Late 80s, early 90s, I'm watching guys whistle at women walking down the street, shouting things at women walking down the street. And I'm looking at that thinking, I was lucky because my introverted nature, I didn't do it. But I think if I'd have stayed in that sector of that industry, I have no doubt I would have felt that was normal. I would have developed a normalization of those behaviours. And whether I would or I wouldn't, I can't say because I come away from it. But I would suspect that just what I know about behavioural science, I suspect that my behaviours would have gradually drifted to become part of the social norm that I was within.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which was those behaviours.
Yeah.
So that's a big challenge, isn't it?
Because absolutely. Yeah, and I think, there's behaviour from all sides as well. Like there's a lot in terms of, like you said, men and in particular environments, but also women a lot of the time also normalise the behaviour, and like that's something that we try and address as well, because we have to talk about it as a gendered problem because it is rooted in male violence, but there are still many women who unfortunately have internalised this or normalised this as well, and that might victim blame or even blame themselves when things happen and stuff like that. So there really is something for everyone pretty much to do better on, myself included. So it's for us, it's really like, how does everyone shift that? We kind of work on a scale, and it's like, how does everyone shift themselves up that scale a little bit to make the world safer, rather than trying to take people from one end of the scale to the other, because it's more likely from a behavioural perspective as a societal shift if we can kind of move everyone a little bit.
How do you connect with those? I think it's one of those areas as well. It's nearly like, if I'm not directly impacted by it, it's sort of like, that's their problem. How do you get over that barrier? How do you connect with those people that have that mindset that they're neither sort of for or against things, this middle ground people, but they're sitting there thinking, well, it doesn't directly impact me, so I'm not worried.
Yeah, exactly. I think, so as I say, we work on a scale, so every initiative is designed to meet people somewhere along that scale, and that's basically all the way from perpetrator to advocate and kind of everything in between. So it is really like, I think, again, with any social issues, trying to meet people where they are and trying to understand why, like you said, maybe it's environment or whatever, why they think the way they do. And, sometimes you do have to use kind of, you don't want it to be for their own benefit, but sometimes you have to use that. So firstly, like, when it comes to men, for example, who might be really against it and often, or not against it, but really kind of, unaware or don't think it's a problem, talking to them even just about kind of how the same kind of societal rules that cause these problems also cause men problems, right, in terms of like mental health and all this kind of stuff, like the same structures that are, there's a knock-on effect obviously of women experiencing violence, but a lot of it is rooted in problems because of the pressures put on men, for example, because of the society we're in. So say about, not being emotional and things like that. So sometimes you kind of have to utilize people's own, own incentives. Sometimes we have to say, imagine if it's your daughter or your sister or, someone you care about, because unfortunately the statistics show that it's pretty much impossible to exist and not have someone in your life that has experienced it or that is affected by it. So even if it's, you know, not yourself, it's people that you care about. And I think that's a big thing like that we talk about, is trying to humanize the problem, because with a lot of social issues, again, you see statistics and it's just statistics. And when we talk about individual stories and experiences, and I try and talk about mine with people, because I think it's really important to kind of realize on a human level what that actually must feel like if you've never been through it, rather than just seeing statistics and it being like, oh, 80% of women have experienced this, and people are like, okay.
I'm thinking, like, as a parent, I've 2 children, a daughter and a son, both grown up, gone through their teens, gone through their going out with their mates phase. And like when you're talking there, I'm just thinking in my head that when my daughter went out, I was worried about what you're talking about. When my son went out, I was worried about him being an idiot. You know what I mean?
That, of course.
The fear was very different.
Yeah.
Because I was worried about her safety and obviously from a point of view of being attacked. Whereas I didn't have the same thought of worried whether she's going to get drunk and fall over, whereas my son was the total opposite. I was never worried about maybe him being attacked in a sense. So I can see how...
And I think like often, like when you're talking about that, for example, it is that, and again, there's obviously a certain level where we have to try and keep ourselves safe. Like, I'm not saying that that's never ever a thing, but you know, you're talking about, for example, your son, that's his behaviours, whereas you're talking with your daughter about other people's behaviour towards her. And it's trying to shift the narrative. Like, that's one of the things that we're trying to do is, you know, we talk a lot about mental load, for example, which I don't think is addressed generally that much when we talk about this. We talk a lot about the aftermath and the trauma and the, you know, the experience, like how you deal with it after or even during a situation, but the kind of mental load that's just carried day to day and how that differs often between genders especially. You know, we have like this mental load checklist and it's got like 50 something things on it of like how many things do you do as a woman, and often women don't even realize that they do those things or that men don't do those things. Again, obviously it depends on the environment you're in, the neighborhood and things like that, but if you put both of them in the same location, for example, all else remaining the same, would they both act in the same way? And usually it's no. And I think that's the thing, it's the mental load that is carried day to day, and sometimes, and not to, but sometimes put on by parents or people that care about you, because they're like, make sure you do this to stay safe, make sure you do that. And it just, you know, people, like, it's exhausting and it's constant. And, you know, we're just working on a campaign at the moment, actually, that's like to do with the contradictions, because so often we're told how to stay safe, but they're also very contradictory. And that makes it even more difficult. So it's like, you know, take public transport so there's other people around. Then people be like, no, take a taxi, because then you can at least you can track your journey, and you can share your journey with someone else, but then you're alone with potentially a man in a closed environment. So it's just, there's constantly this mental load carried that often is not the same in both ways, and we don't talk about it that much, or the impact like on mental health and things like that. So
I was doing some research obviously with yourself coming onto the podcast. I really wanted not only understand what yourself and the team are about with HASSL, but also really trying to dig into some of the issues. And I was I found this report in 2023 from the European Parliament, and it was about online safety, female and women's rights and online safety. And I picked 3, and I'm going to go to my notes here because I think it's very important that, you know, the 3 big points that I noticed within the report. Common harassment tactics included doxing, impersonation, hateful speech, photo manipulation, and non-consensual distribution of explicit images. Then another point within it was a lady, Laura Bates, had stated, suddenly someone is able to send you an incredibly graphic rape threat into the palm of your hand. You know what I mean? And then, you know, and that's where then I came across this consensus where they'd identified, instead of placing the emphasis on the victim's intervention, should focus on educating. And that's really what you're about, isn't it? That
absolutely. Like it is just, it's so hard because it's such learned behaviour over such a long time, and it's so built into us. Like, we'll find things every day that we're still doing because you know, to an extent, this is how the world was built, and we're trying to unlearn all of those behaviours and all of those things that we've always been taught to think and feel. And, you know, there's so many different things that feed into it, like the media a lot of the time puts the victim as the kind of key part of a news story rather than talking about the perpetrator and things. There's just so many subtle things that you don't notice until you notice, and that's kind of part of what we're trying to do, is like make even awareness of things like that. We did a video the other day on socials that was an incident that happened recently, and it was a woman who got attacked and raped, unfortunately, in a racist attack. That was kind of, yeah, what it was fueled by, and the story was just all about her. It was about woman gets attacked. There was nothing about the perpetrators in the headline. That wasn't the focus. It was very much, and it unfortunately subconsciously puts this thing of the victim, the association is on the victim. It's like, what did they do wrong? Or you're highlighting that a woman was attacked, not that there is an epidemic of, unfortunately, male violence going on. And, you know, sometimes, and not necessarily out of an agenda, just out of habit, people write in that way, and it feeds into how we think.
I find that with a lot of media conversations, because I notice when we talk about male suicide, there's whether it's a rule, but there is a blanket approach by the media that they actually don't state that it was a suicide. But then I think you need to go and have conversations with the family, and if they're happy for you to tell that story, because I think we're just hiding it. We're just brushing it under the carpet. And I think this is the problem, that, you know, media deciding what we need to hear. But it's not changing anything at all. And again, with my research, and I've written this down, and I want to, because what you spoke about there, you know, we're talking around those societal challenges. And when I started digging, I was absolutely blown. My mind was blown, because what I realized, we talk about institutional issues with this, but I came across this and realized the scale of your problem is huge. Because this is I'm going to quote some things that I've found, and this, in 2006, a judge in the USA summed up a rape case by suggesting the perpetrators had misread the signals. The victims made their intentions known. They wanted to party. The judge also said, this is a different case to one where there is no perceived invitation. And then I found another one. In another case, a judge said the 12-year-old rape victim had not suffered harm, quote, other than the ramifications of losing her virginity, which the court does not find to be especially serious harm. The girl did not suffer any physical injuries, unquote. And I'm sitting there, and I know people go, but sure, that's America. That's a judiciary in America. But I started digging then, do we have examples in the UK? And I came across a lady, Dr. Charlotte Proudman, a barrister, and she had been speaking up about the poor responses in terms of our judiciary, in terms of sentencing, and how we were treating victims in the courtrooms and things like this. And because she spoke out now, and I think we have to take this into context, because every day we see barristers and solicitors come on and rip the judiciary apart. This lady spoke out, or this barrister spoke out, and they pulled her in front of a tribunal, and they tried to disbar. And after a period of time, she was found, I think it was 2 years it took to prove that she had no case whatsoever to answer, that she was literally replicating what males done in that society, but because she had said it, and it was questioning some of this. And I'm sitting at that and thinking, if the very system that is designed to solve your problem is also part of the problem, how do you, where do we go from those sorts of things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, I think we're under no illusion of how big the problem is that we're trying to solve, and not just, we operate globally. Like we offer our, we're trying to design everything so that we can offer it across the world. And we, for example, have an ambassador program. We have people in over 100 countries already part of it. And it firstly demonstrates how universal this problem is, because no matter what society you're living in, whether you think it's super progressive or a third world country or whatever, they're in slightly different forms, but it is the same experiences. We talk to ambassadors every single day, and it's the same experiences, just in slightly different forms, in different, you kind of say in different fonts. Like, it is the same thing, and it is so universal, and it doesn't matter where you are. So it is a huge problem, because also, I've kind of found that, like, people try, because it is such a massive problem, people obviously try to solve it in a more localized kind of approach. And I don't think that's going to solve the problem. And I understand that that is a big thing to take on, but I'm like, someone's got to try, and I'm going to try. So that's why we've done it in even though it makes everything a million times more complicated, obviously. It does also, we did a video, well, our country reps, it wasn't me, did a video the other day of all different things, kind of each saying something that happened in their country, and I think something about 500,000 views or something in a week, because it's resonated with people that much, and people started commenting in my country, from all over the world, different things that happen. So I think that's the first thing, is not only is it so inbuilt in systems, but it's also everywhere. Like, people are like, oh, it only happens. No, it doesn't. It's literally everywhere. In terms of systems, that's kind of part of the reason, like the barriers to reporting, part of what we're doing is so like fundamental to solving this problem, because it isn't just the fact that it happens, it's also that there's so many barriers to reporting it happening, and which allows the problem to continue, because if perpetrators aren't held accountable, we know it's repeat behaviour. It's not every single man out there that's doing this, it is repeat offenders. There's still too many, but it is the people do it over and over, and also by catching people earlier, in a lot of cases, you can then prevent them going on to do more serious kind of forms of violence, domestic violence, all this kind of stuff. There's so many reasons to solve this.
But the conviction rate as well is...
The conviction rate is so low. And this is the thing. So, part of what we're doing, and I can't go into loads of detail, but is to try and building some reporting technology which changes the way that reporting is handled, the way that the whole thing from start to end. There are so many barriers to reporting. It's so complicated to report. People are so afraid of judgment. People don't have support around them. It's very traumatic often. Often, even if you get evidence, it's not deemed enough evidence, or it's not deemed serious enough, or there's not the resources to deal with it because of funding and all that kind of stuff. And there's just so many barriers, and it's hard enough even to report anyway, just from a personal perspective, even if there was no barriers, just from a, kind of reliving that experience. But having all these barriers as well, I think all the time, anyone who gets remotely close to a court case is unbelievably amazing and strong, because I don't know how people do it. Like, the amount of challenges you have to face, and it's, it's not just the system, it's the judgment, it's, we talk to a lot about people, kind of police forces and stuff. Like, it is still unfortunately quite built in, and people have these attitudes subconsciously. It's not necessarily that they're a bad person, but
I think you're even, I think, when you're questioning techniques of, rather than deal with the situation, it's like, but what was she drinking? What was she wearing? What was she doing?
Exactly.
And you're going, that is totally irrelevant.
And it's like, would you ask these same questions if someone got mugged or whatever, and it's like, no, you'd say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. What did they look like? It's not about the victim in that situation. It's not about what they did. Oh, well, you were carrying money on the street. Well, of course you're going to get, but we have those kind of attitudes when it comes to like sexual violence, and it is like, awareness kind of sounds quite fluffy, but it is such a big problem. Like, we have a survey on our website where we just constantly collect people's experiences, but also ideas of what they want to see, and we have like a feedback section, and so many people just say the amount of stuff I've learned, the amount of things that I didn't know, the amount of validation I now feel because no one talked about this before, or I'm not saying no one talks about it, but they hadn't seen it being talked about in the way that we talk about it. The bar is so low, unfortunately, when it comes to this problem, that even things that might seem not that like groundbreaking actually are making like a massive difference already to people. And I think that's the thing, the awareness is actually so important, because if you're not aware, you're not going to do anything about it. Like you said, people are just going to be like, it's not my problem.
Do you find maybe one of the challenges with this sort of thing is that it gets picked up as like a campaign, and when we use the word campaign, we think of ending. We think it's like short term, or we'll have a campaign. It's, I know in a lot of environments the word diet is hated because it presumes a start and an end point. How do we get, especially with HASSL, that people thinking, oh well, HASSL's just a campaign, rather than think of it's like a systemic practice and education that we need to put in place?
I mean, this is the thing that always frustrated me, and the reason why, partly the reason why I never kind of went down like the politics route and things like that, because I feel like it's so hard. You do campaigns and they last a certain amount of time, like you said, then they end, and then it's kind of, it shouldn't be that the campaign is the other. We talk about this with like male allies. We talk about male allyship, and I don't like the term because it puts men who are allies as the other and men as the default, whereas it should be misogynist or sexist that is the default, and men should be the default, misogynist and sexist should be the other. They should be the outliers. And this is the way we should talk about it, because then it encourages. I understand why the word, like the term, and we use the term allyship sometimes because obviously people resonate, they know what it means, but it is that you're almost like put on this pedestal, or you're distanced for being an ally, whereas that should be the default in these situations. I mean, it's the same as like when we talk about LGBTQIA+, and like I'm an ally, and it's like, well, the default should be that we don't hate people. And and people who do kind of present that behaviour should be the other. So that's like a flip thing that we need to do as a society over time. Sorry, I completely lost my train of thought then.
I think
what was the last question?
It's raised a point there in my head of that a lot of campaigns, although
campaign
we're
thing,
trying to get away from that concept, but when these sorts of things, regardless of whether what we're talking about now, or whether we're talking about other societal issues, they tend to fall, down these like adversarial
it's
things,
almost,
and like
it's
you
like
think of
a
even
tick box
Brexit,
thing and
like
stuff.
Brexit. What you have in those situations is that because they become adversarial, that the people that become the loudest voices are on the fringes, because everybody in the middle who are very important to get into this environment are afraid of that, because I don't want to be pigeonholed in there or there, because I am moderate and I want to have these conversations, but then they become afraid of it because the adversarial approach. How
exactly.
Do you, especially with what you're dealing with, how do you stay away from that?
Well, I think so I always try to. As I say, my background is like entrepreneurship, and like I've had my own businesses before and stuff, and I try as much as possible to apply, because I always think, if people who are very successful entrepreneurs actually applied their thinking to social issues, we could solve a lot of problems, but unfortunately it doesn't often come hand in hand. But for me it does. So that's why I'm like trying to use a lot of strategic moves, I guess, to do this. And it's why we're a social enterprise and not a charity. I want to self-fund. I don't want to be restricted. I also trying to avoid investment, because I want, I'm going to avoid it for as long as humanly possible, and hopefully we never have to do it. But I don't want our agenda to be dictated by anyone else. I know that I'm doing this for the right reason, and I know that what my mission is, and I don't want it to ever stray away from that. So the more like autonomy and ownership you have over it, the more that I can keep that being the case. And that's, it presents a lot more challenges. Like, we could have done things a lot easier if we had gone for charity status or whatever. But I want this to be long term. I want it to be systemic. I want it to be, this is a problem. Governments come and go, and then they change, and it's like nothing ever really happens structurally and long term and built into the system. And I think it takes something external to do that. That's kind of why I was like, I have to do it this way. As I say, I didn't go down the politics route of I can go into politics and try and change this. I'm not saying that politicians don't change things, but what I want to do, I don't think is feasible through a politics route, because of all the bureaucracy and the lack of funding and all this kind of stuff. I think it takes something external that brings all these different bodies and organisations together, which is partly what we're working on now, to create this, not broken up, everyone working on something different, and even between police forces, things are so segmented, and trying to create this cohesion that can actually have a real chance at like tackling the problem, because it's such a massive problem, and like we're just expected to live with it. And
and it's one of those, it needs to be underpinned, I think, with education at such a young age as well, because I think a lot of our challenges that, we look at social media and men drifting down this concept of alpha male and all this, these different social media, because they get attached to somebody, but the algorithm. Yes. I talk about this with algorithms, that if they understood how it was designed, that as an individual, I could click on something and laugh at it in the first instance. Yes. You could be looking at this thing, look at this guy, look at what he's saying, this guy's extreme. But because I've spent time on it, it just keeps feeding me his content or her content.
And then that becomes your
all of a sudden,
environment.
Well, this boy must be right. And I start to develop those social behaviours, because I think this is normal. Yeah. And like our young people are such at that impressionable age of where they're developing. They're only developing what they think and what their values are, really. Yes, that can be put on them by their family, but really they have to work that out for themselves when they get to that teenage. But we need these programs in schools.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because I think...
this is part of our... So, as I say, we're on stage 3 right now. Part of stage 4 is school programs, and is going in from a really young age. And I think sometimes that, like, scares parents, because they're like, are you going to be talking about sex when they're like 4 and stuff? And it's like, that's not the point. It's trying to unlearn behaviours and attitudes. It's still being age appropriate and still kind of not traumatizing young kids. But like things like when we talk about you throw like a girl or you run like a girl, and like questioning, should we be saying this and that kind of thing. And there's so many things that when you watch kind of social experiments of young children, they are learned behaviours. We're not born being misogynistic or racist or whatever. It's from, like you said, from environment and people around us and that kind of thing. And like there is there is consent taught in schools to an extent, and especially in high school, but it needs to start far younger. It needs to be almost like before they can even get to the point of thinking that way, it's already unlearned. And that's, especially with, like, as you say, the rise of social media, it is developing so quickly and it's so scary. And if you're already, for example, like a young boy who is struggling with certain things, maybe it's like masculinity or whatever, you are going to be more likely to fall down that hole. And that is, if we can get to people younger, and it isn't just teaching about this, it's like highlighting the issues of why men might fall down that hole and trying to prevent those as well. It's not just teaching about consent and things like that.
I work in a lot of environments with young people and, young men as well, and they'll say, but sure, freedom of speech. And my response to that is, 100% you have freedom of speech, but you're confusing freedom of speech with freedom of consequence. Yeah. And I think this is where we're getting to, is that people think they can say and do anything. And 100%, that's your prerogative. Yeah. But that doesn't absolve you of the consequence of what you've done. Yeah. And I think the problem with social media at the moment is there's a lack of consequence. Yeah. There's such a lack of consequence that these,
Yeah, I mean, we were saying it before, we get it all the time. And it's like, and a lot of the time it is faceless accounts or I mean, some people do have their whole details on, and I'm just like, that is, what is the thought process behind that behaviour? Because if anyone saw that, who knows you, that's, the kind of things they say, and I won't, but they're very horrendous.
And I think I always question their environment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is what we talk about.
That, I talk about, are they living that experience? Are they in that environment? What are they doing? Is there a lack of connection for them?
100%.
And the only way they can connect with people is through you.
Well, this is why, because when people ask us about like dealing with that and stuff, and I think, I mean, Carla as well obviously has to read all of that stuff, and like we do have a lot of filters on and things like that, but people ask us a lot, like, how do you deal with that? And I think it is, like, we talk about it a lot, but I think it is trying to understand that it's a projection of lacking in their own life, and some kind of, you know, like you said, insecurity or lack of connection or lack of love. Like there's something, and it's almost kind of, I don't look at them in a way that I'm angry. I look at them in a way that I feel sorry for them, and I'm like, what has led you to that is what you choose to do with your time. You know, and sometimes it is like, we have it from like older men as well. It's not just young boys that, you know, that is just like, you know, very public facing and stuff. But yeah, it doesn't, I think when I was younger, it would have bothered me a lot more. I used to get a lot more like annoyed at when people thought things differently to me. And I think now it's like what we're saying, like trying to understand where that behaviour's come from. It's a consequence of something. Why do you think, what is lacking that, you know, makes you feel that way? Because often hate comes from internalized, you know, you don't kind of feel the need to hate others if you are
there's something in their environment where they become disconnected from normal society.
Exactly.
What is that? And that's some of the problems we maybe need to solve as well.
And a lot of that spills out into public harassment. Like this is the thing. It's like you said, you almost like kind of gain your confidence by posting online and having that lack of consequence, that then it leads to then being brave enough or bold enough to then go and do it. Brave is maybe the wrong word, but, you know, bold enough to go and do it in real life. And, you know, seeing more of that because of, unfortunately, the rise in online misogyny
and I think,
misogynistic creators and all this.
Look, anybody that takes on what you're doing, I have a lot of respect for them, because you make yourself a target, especially in early stages of this sort of thing, when you become the face of such a social change. Because I want to stay away from that word campaign, because to me this is a social change. It's not really about a campaign. That when you put yourself as the figurehead at this stage to that like you become the target, don't you? You're easy. You're the cannon fodder for people just to target. I
mean, one of the reasons Carla like is a lot more now the face of HASSL, and I think like for me, I'm quite a private person, and like on my own social media, like I don't post at all. Like I think I've posted probably once in the last 4 years or something on my own. I don't want to be known. I don't have any desire, like I want to be behind the scenes. But for me, I think watching other people's journeys, especially in social impact, and the area that we are working on is so sensitive, that I didn't want people to think, which is that, oh, there's some man behind this who's just trying to make money out of women being scared. Do you know what I mean? Like I felt like I needed to show up and explain how I got to this point, and like this is like my life, like what I've always wanted to do with my life. And you know, I'm also a young girl who goes through this, and like I can relate. And it's not that I'm, you know, there's a lot of people who will be cynical about like these kinds of organizations, and I felt it was important, at least in the beginning, to show up and show like why. And because I think people believe in people at the end of the day, not in a brand. And you know, I think like other people in the team like been amazing additions, and you know, Carla goes and like, you know, posts so much content that I don't have to approve of, because she just gets it, and we live and breathe this. We're not just kind of doing it for the sake of doing it. And you know, I think that's so important that people understand that. But then I'm also like, I hate being on things, so I'm trying to reduce my way down now that we've built the foundation, because it's not my favorite thing. It's probably my least favorite thing to do. So
look, I just listening to what you've built, and like I said, I have a lot of respect for what you and the team are doing. I know there's always somebody sits in front of the microphone and has the conversations, but I know there's people behind that make these things work, and
Absolutely.
And it's great to see, you know, looking that there's definitely a global feel about this. I've seen a lot of the social media comments and people that are ambassadors and things like that. So I think you're definitely on a great route to some form of success with this. And I'm from my personal point of view, I wish you all the success in the world, because I have a 3-year-old granddaughter that I would like to think in 10 years' time, when she's going out, I don't have the same thoughts that I had with my daughter when she went out. But what we do to finish off our podcast, we have a bit of, or try and create a question that we ask everybody. And this sort of season, our very first guest was a lady by the name of Emily Bond, and she is a rocket scientist.
Okay.
She had spoken at TEDx for me, and then I had her on the podcast. And I was thinking, what can I do to have a question that sort of links that? And we come up with this question that we've given everybody now that's been on the podcast. And the question is, if you could fire something off into space today and it's never returning, what would it be and why?
Does it have to be a physical thing?
No, it can be anything at all. It's
there's so many. There's people, but I'm not going to say them. Yeah. You can probably read between the lines. Gosh, there's so many. I guess like patriarchy or toxic masculinity. I think it harms everyone, and it's so built into us, and it's that constant thing of people fighting one another instead of the system, not fighting physically, but battling one another. And I think if we could get rid of toxic masculinity, I think, and not to go on a whole other tangent, but we kind of talk about, I think my generation kind of became the most progressive in terms of men being like understanding and like getting to a point where we're kind of, more and more men becoming feminists and all this kind of stuff. And then with the rise of, certain creators and the use of social media and all this kind of stuff, it just has, you see now that it's just, we hit a peak and then it's gone and that's scary. And I think if we could have just remained on the same trajectory, it could have been a whole different story. That would be my